supposed to be in. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time of day you're watching this. Let me go to YouTube because, as you know, you can't trust YouTube. It says you're connected, and then 15 minutes later, you realize you've been talking to the wall. Oh, see, for once, we are connected to YouTube. So again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are time traveling here. This is the time traveling show with David Macho and Daniel Chabon. Because just so you know, it's 8 a.m. That man is a superhero. It's 5 p.m. here,
Yeah.
8 a.m. for him. And, you know, we are in a wormhole in everything in life here. You know, we are with the pandemic, with the snowstorm that we had in Spain 2 weeks ago, with 5 p.m., 8 a.m. So, first of all, how are you, Daniel? How's things?
I'm doing okay. Before we logged in here, we covered some of the pandemic and how that's been kind of hard on everyone the last year, and comics and conventions and stores and stuff like that. And I live in Portland, Oregon, and over here in the last year, we also had some serious forest fires. And just last weekend, we had an ice storm. So Dark Horse had been without power for the last couple of days, but now I'm able to check my email, so that's great. But work's good and everything's pretty good beyond all that. So,
Have you been able to go back to work to the office at all, or is off limits still?
it's not off limits. Most people do not go, and most people are working at home. I do go into the office usually 3 times a week just to get out of the house, and it's pretty nice just because it's so quiet there, and I don't feel like it's an unsafe place regarding being contagious or anything, just because it's so limited with the amount of people that are currently there. So,
Do you? What is the thing? Imagine that I'm your doctor. My name is Victor Frankenstein. I just turned this into a syringe. Just popped a couple into you, so you're fully vaccinated. And I'm doing that. Rest of the world, fuck it. You know, pandemic's over. I just killed everybody. So my name is God, by the way. I just changed my name again. Now I'm kidding. What is the thing that you've been dying to do since this started, but you have been containing yourself from doing it, and now it's like the first that you could do the moment they tell you pandemic is over and you can do whatever you want?
There's a lot of different things, but one thing I really have been missing is going to the movie theaters. We have some really great movie theaters in Portland, Oregon. My favorite one is called the Hollywood Theater, and they show a lot of old movies on 35 millimeter and 70 millimeter. And I used to go there once a week, and I haven't seen a movie in a theater for a year and a half now. I think the last movie I saw was Invisible Man. So I really miss going to the movie theater. I'm excited when I get that opportunity again, and then also go see some live shows, go see some concerts, and then just go to like a bar and sit down and have a stranger next to me and no masks, and just have that opportunity where there's no fear of being in public next to people with no masks on.
Yeah, that moment where you are with a coffee, not feeling like you're gonna die because somebody's around you. Like...
Yeah, just to be able to sit down casually or enter a place casually. Like, there's a luxury to it now that I kind of miss. So we're not waiting in line to go to the grocery store. So
there you go. And do you miss movies like a lot, or you've gotten used to watch it at home?
I don't really watch a lot of movies at home right now. I've just I think at the start of the pandemic, I was watching a lot, and I just kind of got bored, and I'm trying to find different things I can do. So I've been doing a lot more reading and exercising. And then when I went to go see movies in the theater, there were never really new movies I went to go see. I usually went to go see old movies or like events. It's just a good excuse to get out of the house, and you have a different experience when you watch a movie in the theater, I think, than at home. A lot of the times when I see a movie in the theater, I have a memory about it, who I was with, what the experience was like. I never have that at home when watching TV or a movie with someone at home. It doesn't seem to affect my memory in the same way as like an experience. So there's just something about going to a theater, getting a snack or a beer or a soda there, and then just seeing something on the big screen. So,
are they open in Portland or not? The theaters, I mean.
You know, they haven't been open for a while, and I think I read recently that they've opened back up with a certain capacity.
Mhm.
A lot of them are doing private showings, so you can rent out the entire theater with a friend and watch it just with a private party. But I think I'll wait until vaccinations start to kick in here before being in a
Oh,
closed.
I've gone to the movies here during the pandemic. I watched the net and have to do it because of the kid. I went to watch Scooby Doo. Don't do it. Don't do it. Just
Oh yeah,
don't do it.
it was a new Scooby Doo.
Just don't do it.
Yeah.
It has a lot of nostalgic moments when you can see, the old characters that you love. For example, what's the name of the caveman? Oh my God, it's
Oof.
Captain Caveman, I think it is. Well, that one when you see that character and you laugh, but the rest of it is just okay. You have the characters, you don't know what to do with them. You just have 3D, so you're going to do them. But anyway, I went to theater, and here I don't know if it's the same in the US. In fact, the system is really good. The security system. I mean, in the two theaters I've gone to, in one you can pick, and automatically the algorithm separates pop, 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 pop. So you have
cool.
like a shield where nobody can see it, and the other one you can go and look at the map, and in the map you have like groups of two and group of one, in case you want with your couple as you go along. So if you pick one, is around 4, and if 2, around 4. So all the time you're safety. And if you want to get the popcorn, etc., you don't do it in the theater. You do it at the same time you pick your tickets online. So you go to a separate window. You show your ticket, or you say the number or the QR code, and they just give it to you and you move away.
That's great. That seems pretty safe.
Yeah. That's why I'm surprised when in many places they tell me theaters are closed, and I'm like, it's just a matter of security measures. It's like schools. If you take the security measures and you follow science, you make it distance. The same door where people enters to go to the movie is not the same door where they go out. They have to go through a separate door, so the groups don't mix, etc. Well, they shouldn't mix anyway because they have to clean the theater. But you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, hopefully by the spring around here, things will start to look a little bit closer to normal. So.
And how it is, because many people have been talking about the movies. They crave to watch the new movies, but you're talking about the other experience, which I also love, which is watching classic movies in the theater. I mean, movies that I always say the same example. I love to watch 2001 at home, or Lawrence of Arabia, or Blade Runner. But after I watched them in the theater, all three of them, I didn't realize how good they were, and I love them, and I thought they were masterpieces. But the moment I watched, 2001 in 70 millimeters, like, okay, now I understand. This is a fucking religious experience. This is not a movie. Or you see the landscape in Lawrence of Arabia. I don't know if you've watched those ones in the theater. Anyway,
I've seen 2001 in 70 millimeter in a theater here, and I definitely agree with what you're saying. That's one you you have to see in the theater just to get that different flavor of the experience. So, and then some of my own favorite ones, just seeing in the same theater. I remember they showed Terminator 1 and 2 back to back, which was probably like a good 5 hours, but it went so quickly because it was so entertaining and it was so different to see them in the theater. I just had such a great time.
Yeah, I think I've been asking, the Phenomenon Experience, which is the theater that does this stuff here, showing everything in 70 millimeter, amazing quality. You have to fight to get to the theater, really, because it's not a multiplex. It's just like a special, like, it's not like the Alamo Drafthouse, but you know what I mean. Maybe close to the Hollywood one you mentioned. And I've been asking them to have, a double with Alien and Aliens.
Yeah.
So I just sit down for like 4 or 5 hours and watch them both and forget about everything.
Yeah, I've seen those both in the same theater. This theater I'm talking about it's not an Alamo, but it's pretty identical in style to them. And my favorite thing to do there, and it's every Halloween, so they didn't do it this year because of the pandemic. I did go the year before. They do a 4 movie marathon of horror movies on Halloween. They started at 9 a.m. and it goes all night. And they don't tell you what you're going to watch until they start the movie.
Nice.
Yeah, so you're usually there from 9 until like 9 in the morning. So if you can get through all 4 movies, it's really an experience. But at the end of it, you're just kind of like, I am so ready for sleep.
Don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. I want to
Yeah,
go to bed.
yeah. Everyone's just kind of a zombie when they're leaving the theater. So
Mhm.
it is pretty nice. They give you coffee and donuts for the last movie just so you can kind of like hang in there.
Nice, nice. Here, as you know, they will give you chocolate with churros,
Yeah.
which is the way. Why, of all the chances you had in life, you masochistic person, as myself, why did you decide to get into comics?
Um, so I've always grown up reading comics. I mean, it's basically how I learned to read, which I think is probably kind of a common answer. But my dad, he was like an old school New Yorker who was kind of a Renaissance man. He was a doctor and a lawyer, but he was also really into geek culture and pop culture and into comic books. And when he was a kid, he was a big comic book reader. He grew up in the 1930s, and he kind of passed that attitude onto his sons. I have 3 older brothers, and so when I was a kid living in Washington, D.C., he used to take me to the comic book store. And I kind of feel like at that point, comics, I mean, they definitely weren't as big as they are now. I mean,
Mhm.
conventions weren't like shoulder to shoulder. Like, they were a lot more bare. Like, you could go up to Stan Lee doing a signing and there wouldn't be a huge line. Like, I actually did that when I was a kid. It was just like, oh, there's Stan Lee. I can get something signed. Uh, so he used to take me to comic book conventions every weekend in Washington, D.C. There was always a convention for like sports cards, non-sports cards, comics. He took me to everything. And then he took me to the comic shops and he always bought me stuff. He would buy me, I grew up reading a lot of the old school EC comics just because it didn't feel like something that was for kids, which is why I liked it. It's because it was
Mhm.
so weird and mature. And then I used to buy old school Spider-Mans, and Spawn was big at that point and all kinds of things. So I was reading a lot of comics when I was younger. And then I went to college in the Midwest in Kansas City, Missouri. Got my degree and was trying to figure out what to kind of do with my life from there. I was working in an Italian restaurant at the time as a bartender. And I started to apply to graduate school programs, and I got accepted to one at Portland State University. That was a specialized master's in book publishing and writing. So that brought me to Portland, but also the fact that Dark Horse was in Portland. So I pretty much set a goal for myself to get a master's degree and then also see if there's an opportunity to get into comics or book publishing in general. And I did those things, and I've been at Dark Horse now for probably close to 12 years now. Uh, and in that time too, I never stopped trying to learn new things. And one of the craziest things I did at the same time was I actually went to law school at the same time I was working at Dark Horse full time. So I did that so while I was an assistant associate at Dark Horse, I was working there full time for 4 years while also going to law school at night. And it was probably the hardest experience of my life just because wake up at 8, go to work, leave work at 5, go do 3 classes a night, and then come home at 10:30 and eat as quickly as I can, and then read hundreds of pages of law cases and go to sleep, and then do that for 4 years.
How did you survive that?
Uh, just hang in there. Like every night I kept saying like I can't do it. I want to get out of it because it's a different teaching experience too, which I didn't realize that it's not a school where you can just show up. Most law schools here they teach in the Socratic method where they cold call you. They'll
Mhm.
just randomly call the student and then you have to stand up in front of the class and then the teacher kind of picks on you because they want to make sure you're prepared in practice to speak in front of a court and in front of a
Mhm.
judge. And so they will really grill you in front of the other students and give you a hard time. And that's a heck of a time to do something like that, like right after working a full day at work and not eating dinner. So
Yeah,
It's an
absolutely.
experience, but it was a good experience because really, in the end, like my value, I think, in going and doing that was, when you're in law school, you're reading law cases, and law cases are basically true short stories, and so it's sort of an extension of the English degree I had in the end.
Hmm.
So, and all that reading, is extremely beneficial for what we do. So,
And it's also gives you a completely different experience, completely different view of the creative process, right? Because being in law, yes, of course, it's based in law, but it's also creative because you have to create the arguments to defend or to attack. If you are an attorney or if you are in the other side of the fence.
yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I think it teaches you, or at least the school I went to taught me, is that in order to be like a good attorney or anything, like you need to be a good listener.
Hmm.
And so you're not going to be able to make a good argument if you just talk over someone. You have to actually hear what the other person is saying in order to make like a counter argument. You can't just make something up or talk over someone. And so I think that skill and courtesy is something everyone can kind of gain value from.
Yeah, and a lost art when we're talking about television, because back in the day when somebody was arguing, being politicians or whatever on TV, one person could give their argument, the other could listen, and then counter, as you just said. Now they don't care; they just yell on each other. So it's like, no, you're not even answering. You don't even give a shit about what he's saying because you haven't listened to anything he said, right?
Yeah, it's just all opinions at this point.
Yeah. It's pundits. Yeah, that's the reason they call them that. So, and did you ever want to be an editor, or there was, you wanted to be, you had in mind to be a writer? What was the path?
The path was a little foggy at first. There was times I wanted to be a writer, and I have written things, mostly in college, grad school. I've written to that master's degree, and things were trying to find more enjoyment in editorial. Just the idea of actually working with writers and helping them with their voices. And so I kind of went down that path. And then also we have my older brother is a writer, and I kind of felt like, we don't need another writer in the family. I could kind of just do my own thing. So don't really want to compete.
No, but that was, well, especially considering who your brother is, which I won't get into it here. That's, guys, you can find out. This is about Daniel, not about the brother. No, but what? Sorry?
They can Google it.
Exactly. Google it. Do your work. Do your work, people. No, but I was saying is, in a way, it's got to be something that you want to make your own path, right? It's like, I am not because you don't love your brother, you don't love his path. It's just, I have my own path. Why would I follow the same one? It's not in the family. No?
Yeah, for sure. Well, he also has there's times where I don't think I had the patience for writing. Like, it really takes a lot of skill and time and patience just to be able to sit down and just do it. I think he has that over me. And I kind of found along the way while working as an editor that my skill was in working with other people, not just necessarily working on my own things. And so I think I just kind of developed my own skills and passion along the way as working on multiple different projects at once and helping people with their own voices. And I get a lot of satisfaction and happiness from that. I don't really feel the need to have anything that I do on my own published. I don't know. I don't really need that. So
yeah, I think that always said, and I consider myself into your same group, which is two kinds of people, which is the ones who need to have their own voice, out, and the people who's there to help them, develop that voice, like to push them to have a voice from the other side, and I think you that's what you mean, right? You are in that group. You get a lot more enjoyment, a lot more fun, or whatever you want to call it, satisfaction. In helping them develop their ideas, right? Than to push your own ones out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of what I found along the way is that where I can kind of be useful is like not just helping other people with their ideas, but when they tell me their ideas, I get ideas and I kind of throw that their way. And usually for a creator-owned project, whatever I'm suggesting is not mandatory because this is the creator's baby. I want to make sure that their voice is authentic and they get to do what they want to do. But it's always like a nice harmony that we can have, I found, where they'll present what they're thinking and then it makes me think of something and then we kind of go back and forth and then there's usually just a nice balance there.
Mm-hmm. And then so you just mentioned, working on creator own, but you also work with license, with other, other characters. How different it is for you in terms of the brain muscles you have to use when you're working with something that is owned by a corporation than is licensed by Dark Horse in some cases like Aliens, Predator, etc. Or when it's creator owned. How do you have to change your approach?
It's usually pretty different. So with I don't do that many licensed projects these days just because I really enjoy creator owned. And that was another thing that I grew up reading was like old school Vertigo or some other types of projects that were more along the lines of or the old school Image stuff where the creators actually had some ownership over the characters, and just different types of stories being told. But a licensed project is one where you're kind of assigned it, or you might volunteer to work on a licensed comic like an Aliens or a Predator or a He-Man or something like that. And you're kind of giving yourself another boss when you do that. So instead of the creator, you have the licensor, and they're in charge of approving stuff. And so I'm kind of more of a middleman in that situation, and it's not as fun because it's more about a brand at that point. Sometimes it depends on what the license is and who you're working with, but you'll get a lot of notes, you'll get a lot of changes. Sometimes in the process, you'll get a licensor that's not very understanding to how comics work. So they might request big changes when something's lettered and colored, and that's the last stage for requesting anything big. They always want stuff to come out pretty fast and early, and I don't know, it kind of loses some of the charm about working on a project. Whereas creator owned, there's a lot more time. Things are fun. You're working on original ideas, which is always really interesting and fun to me. So, but most of I don't mean to like talk down on a lot of the licensed stuff because about 90% of the licensed comics I've worked on have been great. And outstanding licensors. And I think my favorite licensor I've worked with, like Mattel was a great licensor. I did all these He-Man books with them at one point. And Fox is a great licensor too. They let me do the William Gibson Alien 3 book. That was one I had been pitching for years and was really excited about. And they actually let me bring in William Gibson, not really to approve anything because he didn't have the rights to approve anything because it was work for hire for him, but they at least let me show him everything along the way as a courtesy, which I found really great on their end, just because, it's William Gibson. And let's be honest, they didn't have to. Yeah, no, they could have just said no, and then that was it. And then, I don't know, it would have taken the value out of the project, but they were really cool about it. So, so yeah. And
is there any, let's say it this way, you enjoy a lot more, as you said, working with creator own, but at the same time, is there any time when you find yourself saying, oh man, I want that license, I want to do it, just because of how much you love it as a reader?
Yeah, I've had some ideas recently too for some other licenses that I thought would be fun to go after. I don't know if I should say here just because in the event they'd ever happen. But yeah, there's always been some things that I would love to work on, just projects that movies or TV shows I had grown up as a kid watching. I will say the He-Man stuff was pretty fun just because the first book we ever did with them was this Art of He-Man book. And I, as a kid, grew up watching He-Man and Masters of the Universe. And one reason why I was hyping up Mattel so much is they were really hands off as a licensor, which is very unusual.
Mhm.
So they basically are like, tell me your vision for this book, and we'll give you as much as you want as possible to put it together. So they mailed Dark Horse like 40 boxes of all this old school material they had in their warehouse of like contracts and cell art and sketches, and it was all disorganized, but it was a lot of fun to just go through. And the original book was going to be 184 pages, but they gave me so much stuff. I was like, do you mind if we keep going up? And they're like, sure. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they just kept approving stuff along the way. And I was just like, we're going to make a really fun book just because you'll let me have fun. And that, like, in the end, like, let's just have fun. Let's make a book together. Like, we don't need to try to rush something. Let's just try to make a really cool looking book. And in the process, it was great because they let me interview a lot of the old creators of the show. Like, I got to talk to Alan Oppenheimer on the phone, who was the voice of Skeletor. He did a lot of voice work. And Dolph Lundgren did an interview for the book, and all kinds of people. That was a really fun experience. So I've always had a good time working with them.
I remember the first time I saw that when I heard about that book was seeing you guys at Dark Horse, and it was just about to be sent to the printer. Oh no, you have the printers already. You know, it hadn't been released, but you already had it in the office, and you showed it to me, and I was like, what's that? It's like that big, and I was like, oh, and we're doing another one. And then you showed me that you were working on correct me if I'm wrong, was the mini comics one, maybe?
Yeah, the mini comics one. That one's huge. That one's like 2,000 pages. And then I did one, I think I did about 5 of them. And then I got a little burnt out because I was like, all right, this is too much He-Man for me. I got to go back to comics.
Yeah. I love He-Man, but not that much.
Yeah, the one I ended on was a character in World Guide, and it had 7,000 entries in it. And so it basically had almost pretty much every character that's ever appeared in any form of the He-Man universe. And so after that, I was like, all right, I'm completely mentally drained of working on He-Man at the moment, so I'm going to take a little bit of a break and go back to comics. So
yeah, I gotta say, I have the first 2. And I don't have the rest. You know, I have the first one, the art, and the mini comics one, and that's enough. And that's enough.
I should send you more.
What?
I should send you more.
That I couldn't say no to that. Anyway, let's discuss that in private. What is as a reader? What is the stuff that you tend to gravitate to? I mean, do you have any particular subject that interests you? Or saying that as in cinema, or that you gravitate to, that you like the most, or you are pretty, open in terms of what you like to read?
I'm pretty open. Like I was saying earlier, I really enjoyed reading like the old school Vertigo comics as a kid. So like all the Sandman stuff, which I actually started rereading just because it's been long enough since my last reading, and it's so great, and it completely holds up. And like Animal Man and all the old Swamp Things. I always liked comics that are a little bit more mature and a little darker, and so I think primarily a lot of the comics I started working on at Dark Horse tend to be more horror related. And the first comics I was working on and I trained under over there were the Hellboy books, which is creator owned. So Mike Mignola owns Hellboy. It's funny because I think a lot of people think of that as a licensed book, but it's not. It's not a licensed book except for the fact that Mike Mignola licenses it to Dark Horse. He owns it completely. And I really enjoyed that experience of working with Mike on those books. And I think when I started to get promoted over there and get to establish my own line, I really liked the idea of working on similar books like that with creators. Some that tend to be a little more mature, and then some a little more lighter and storytelling. So. But yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that I currently work on has been a little more has gravitated closer to horror, or I don't know what else, like a little less sci-fi these days. And then superhero stuff, which had been a little rare for me, but the Black Hammer books are kind of its own, bizarre superhero genre homage comic in a way. So,
and something that Dark Horse had tried for many years to have their own, superhero universe established. With remember we were working in Captain Midnight and all the stuff. Some years before, but Black Hammer is now it's Jeff's. We know it's it's owned by Geof Lemire, but it's now your own dark superhero universe in a way in Dark Horse, right?
Yeah, and I don't think it was never. We have a guest here.
How are you?
Hello, how are you? Muy bien, cariño. Venga, corre, que estamos trabajando.
Bye bye, Daniel.
Bye.
Corre, cierra la puerta. Sorry, she just came back from school. She just told me from the door, please tell him my name is Erin.
Oh, so sweet.
Sorry for the interruption. Please go.
No worries. So yeah, it's weird because I don't think anyone would recommend kind of these days starting your own superhero universe, because most folks at this point are going to be buying the superheroes they're already familiar with, whether or not it's all the Marvel DC characters or even some of the early Image ones. Like most of the times, I think if you're trying to relaunch or do new superhero characters, it's not going to work that well. It's going to be very challenging. And Black Hammer, I don't think was ever originally meant to be like its own. Well, it definitely wasn't meant to be its own like superhero expanded universe. When it started, it didn't actually even start with me. It was pitched to this editor, Diana Schutz, who used to work at Dark Horse, and I think it was pitched like 10 years ago. Like it was in the works for a while, and Geof, I believe, was originally going to write and draw it, and it was only meant to ever be like 10 to 12 issues. And at that point, Geof ended up not doing the project because he went on to work on Sweet Tooth, which I think was around 50 or 60 issues. So that took some time. And then when he was ready to return to working on Black Hammer, I think he was starting to get to the point where he was writing for other artists. And he was talking to Dark Horse again about doing it. And then he brought on Dean Ormston to draw it. And then most of the scripts had been written at that point, and it was only going to be 13 issues long. And the first issue was drawn, and then Dean had a health issue where I believe it was like a brain hemorrhage. And so then the project had to be put aside for like another year or so. And then I became his editor on the project. And Dean was starting to get better and was able to start to draw a little bit better with his hand, because the hemorrhage affected his drawing hand. And at that point, as he was starting to be able to draw again, I was reading all the scripts by Geof, and I said to him, like, I think this is one of the best, if not the best thing you ever written. And all these characters are fantastic, and they all have these backstories and other characters that they've interacted with. Like, I think this can grow. And at the time, I think he was still kind of thinking like, no, I'd kind of like it to just be its own short thing. But over time, he started to get other ideas, and then he started to pitch other miniseries, and then those grew. And so then we ended up having this one called Sherlock Frankenstein, and then another one called Dr. Andromeda, and another one called The Quantum Age. And we just kept going and going. And then, now we have this big expanded Black Hammer universe that's doing really well and has been a lot of fun to work on. And we put a lot of great, interesting artists on it. So it's been a great experience, and it's been a successful superhero universe. So.
And now you're tired of those superheroes now, or you are as involved and having fun like a kid?
It's still fun, so I'm gonna go as long as Geof wants to go. So. And
let me ask you this: somebody sends you a pitch. You said, Geof didn't send it to you; it was to Diana, but doesn't matter. Somebody sends you a pitch. What is the thing that you need to see in any pitch to keep you interested, if there's any? And what's the thing that you definitely like, no, not again? That you're like, they don't want if I ever see this again on a pitch, I kill somebody. So what could it be?
What I like to see in a pitch is, for one thing, I think every editor has their own subjective opinion on this, and who knows what's the best. But in the end, from my own experience, I usually like to see something that's not too long. Like, you don't need to show me 30 to 60 pages of your entire science fiction universe and who all the 100 different characters are and where they're coming from. Like, keep it short. Like, most editors, I think, are usually going to be quite busy. They usually are going to want to really focus on what they're working on right now. And in that gap of time, hopefully that pitch will go through. And so that's why keeping it short and like have a hook in there is going to be really important. So if you can tell what your entire story is going to be in one page, I think there's a lot of value in that. Like at the top of the page, maybe do like sort of a log line, like a 1 to 2 sentence, like this is in 2 sentences what the entire story is and why people are going to like it. And then tell the rest of the story from beginning, middle to what you think is going to be the end after that. And that's what I like to see, just because it really shows me that you can kind of condense your thoughts into something that will essentially be my job next to communicate to a buyer. So, and then, what I don't like to see is, something that is super long, because like I can't devote that much time to every person sending me something that's going to be like 60 to 70 pages long. And then also, if I turn down a pitch, I don't usually think it's great to send me another pitch like 5 minutes right after. Like, it's good to space things out, because then it shows me like, well, I guess the last pitch wasn't that important to you. So I don't know. It's good to kind of give editors their time too. And then also, I think it doesn't hurt to kind of show your own background, particularly if you've been published before. Where have you been published before? What is your publishing background? And of course, a lot of people won't have that, which is totally fine. But then also, if you don't have that, like if you're an artist, send me a link to your Instagram or your website or something like that, just so I can get a real good idea of what you do, and a real quick idea of what you do. So hopefully your Instagram is like a lot of your best illustrations that you think you have. Things like that. So,
but are you one of the two groups of editors? There's group one, they love Superman meets Star Wars, or you're in the group of no, don't do that?
I guess it depends on what it is. Yeah. There's a few times where I pitched some weird crossovers just because I thought they'd be fun. So I don't know if the actual working experience on them would be fun in the long run, but I thought like a Booster Gold Time Cop thing would be fun at one point, or things like that. I don't know.
No, but I meant in a pitch, that the log line in a pitch says something like that. This book is Superman meets whatever.
I see what
something, or Alien meets, the Hulk, or something like this. This is something that you like to see in pitches, that helps you see where the writer wants to go, or you're like, now this doesn't help.
I like it if it only makes sense to what is in the pitch. So like those make sense if what you read after that follows that. And there's been times where people say that, where it's like Superman meets Star Wars, and then you read it and it's like, this doesn't sound like that at all. and other times, like I just worked on a book with Matt Kindt called Fear Case, and either he came up with the long line or we did together, but we called it like True Detective meets The Ring, and it's 100% that. Like if you read it, it's very close to that. Those two stories. So I would suggest doing that only if it's true, not something that you are just trying to get big names in there to kind of sell it. Like, be authentic. There's no harm in just being real and authentic to what you're trying to present, because the story has to be authentic to you, and and it has to mean a lot to you, and you shouldn't steer away from what it is.
Yeah, some editors have told me that they hate it because it just means, you're just throwing big names, or because you think that's going to, bring attention to the book. So they used to tell people, if this, what you just said, if it's not 150% that, don't do it, because it won't work in your benefit. It will work against you.
Yeah. But yeah, just look at what you have. Like, this is your story. You want to get it in front of people. You want it published, and then you want people to digest it and read it and buy it, and critics to criticize it. Like, be prepared for people to analyze this thing. So I hope you're ready to kind of present it in a fashion that you can sell.
Mm-hmm.
And so look at the story that you think is. I mean, when a pitch is coming, I really hope, and that's the other thing, that it's a finished pitch, because sometimes I get pitches that just aren't finished. Like, it won't tell me where the story is going. It's not everything's there. Well, actually, one of my biggest pet peeves is and this has happened quite a few times, where I'll get pitches and then they'll have a twist, but it doesn't tell me what the twist is in the pitch. And I'm just kind of like, I'm not buying this. I'm not buying it yet because, like, it doesn't exist yet, but you can tell me what the twist is, because you're trying to sell it to me. Like, you're trying to get me to want to present it to get approved at Dark Horse. Like, you got to tell me where this is going. Like, I want to know what the twist is, because that's the part that's going to make me say yes or no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's one thing is George Lucas hiding from everybody except for, Mark Hamill, and that was 5 minutes before they shot it, that Darth Vader was, Luke's father.
Yeah,
because that was a sequel and he had the money, he could allow to do it. But imagine Lucas going to Fox with the first one, and hiding there, like, I'm not going to tell you the twist. I'm not going to tell you that Darth Vader is the father. What Fox would have said, I'm not doing the movie.
Yeah, I'd be like, get out of here. Yeah. I've been listening to a Sopranos podcast, and I guess they did that too with most of the characters, and that the cast didn't know when they would get whacked or not, so they just kind of learned, like, and sometimes in post-production.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's nuts. And the other side, as you said, I love what you just said about not sending one pitch after the other when the first one is rejected, because maybe that's what you said, but the impression is probably that for an editor, that you send it like boxes of cereal, right? That there's no thought process. So you need to space things, even if it doesn't look that you have like 5 pitches in a drawer, and you just send one after the other, not caring who's the editor, or if that editor is interested in that kind of specific material. You just throw them out. That's not a good look for a writer, right?
It's not, and it's just not considering that the editor, the editors usually has other stuff that they're working on right now. And, I don't know how many projects I'm working on right now, just because it's just a lot. And so pitches come in between those, and I really try my best to get back to people right away. That's one of my big things. But if I'm approving something or turning down something, it's really helpful if we can just kind of space things out, because it shows me there's not between the pitches from the same person, I don't know, it seems like there's not enough value in them on their end. It's like, well, if this isn't worth it, what about this? Then what about this? It's just like throwing out things for bites, as opposed to being like, I worked really hard on this. It's really important to me. I think people will want this.
Yeah,
I know people will want this. What do you think? Like, show me why this story is important to you and why you want to tell it. And then this is not always the case. Some people will be able to pitch multiple things at once, and they're all going to be awesome, and be like, all right, well, let's start here, and then we'll go here later. Mm-hmm. So it's a little more rare, but it happens. So it's not impossible either, but it's always good to consider the other person's time.
Yeah, exactly. In many cases, I can guess that the people who does that, in general, is just impatient and don't even think about what they're doing. So it's really good that you're saying this here, so they understand. First, there's a question called time. Second, the free time an editor has to, it's not the same, as I always say, to watch 3 pages in a portfolio than to read pitches. It takes a lot more time, right?
Sure.
So you need more time to do that, and you need to give the editor time to consider. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, depending on the editor, you have a certain taste, to say it in a way, and or the publisher, publishes a certain kind of books. So you also have, as a creator, it's also important to consider who's the editor you're pitching to and the kind of book you're pitching to that editor of that publisher, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes I'll get pitches for other Dark Horse characters that I don't work on, that other people work on, or other licenses. And those I'll usually, if the other editors who work on them are interested, I'll forward those pitches to them. But yeah, I do think it's really helpful if you can get some kind of idea of who you're pitching to before you pitch. So like, I don't know, just maybe look me up for a second and see some of the books I've worked on. And then like, I don't know, I don't really do like a lot of hard sci-fi these days or too many other, like I don't do a lot of video game license books. I have in the past, but maybe see what some of the editors are currently working on. And then that'll kind of help you get an idea of what to pitch them, or if what you're currently working on would be appropriate for that particular person.
Mm-hmm. In a way, people, what I mean to tell here is do your research before you pitch. that's part of your job as a creator, is do your research, because if you waste the editor's time, it's not a good thing.
Well, then I also like sometimes like if I get a pitch, and like I said, I always try to get back to someone right away because I think their time's valuable as well, and I want to make sure they're not sitting and waiting on me for several weeks. So I usually take a day or two to get back to people, and then depending on what the story is or who they are or what they published before, like I'll try to guide them to where I think they might be better off if it's a publisher or another editor or something like that. It might just not be me because it's not the kind of thing like that I work on or I particularly want to work on. Like most of the things that I edit these days are just comics I want to work on, just stories that I think are cool and people I want to, creators that I either grew up reading or have liked working with currently. And it's been a lot more selective, but I do also like to bring in a lot of new creators when I can.
Mm-hmm. And the other part of the question is, as I said, which is the thing that when you're reading a pitch, the moment you read it, you're like, oh my God, not again, out.
Gosh, I can't think of one off the top of my head. I mean, there does tend to be a lot of superhero stuff. And it's interesting too, because I feel like one thing I see in pitches that have been coming to me, and also I've heard from other people, is like a lot of people saying, oh, this is my Black Hammer. And it's interesting to see that people are now comparing what they want to present to being this thing that started off kind of small, Black Hammer, as like a little creator-owned superhero thing. And now people are presenting their own stories in that way. I don't know if that's a good example of what I don't want to see, but I don't know. I'm open to anything, really. I'm flexible. Like, I don't mind reading what folks have.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, in many cases, when I ask about this, is when you see in a pitch the same tropes over and over again, it's like there's no originality, or you see like, oh, okay, this story I've been told this story a million times in the same way, so automatically when you read it, your brain disconnects. Does that happen to you, or you still look for the extra bit of that can make it different and interesting?
I think it's more the latter. I'd like to see I just want to see stories that are different. So yeah, I don't need a pitch that's going to be about someone that gets bitten by a radioactive animal and then ends up with powers, and then I just want something weird and different and interesting. And so I think that's why Black Hammer works. It's not necessarily a superhero story. It's about family. And, Mind Management by Kindt is about mental espionage, and like these are weird, unusual comics, and those are the things that I grew up reading and still like to read. Like, I'm not so much into superhero comics these days. I do like them a lot, but I just like to see stuff that's different.
Mm-hmm.
A little more meta.
Yeah, no, we are at we're at a time and age, I think, when we can all think that meta is part of a language, right? It's part of,
Yeah.
the readership is so used to the language and to in many ways to understand it much better than the prose, because they've been reading for many many years, that
Yeah.
we can go that extra step, right?
Yeah, I think that's one reason why I liked Morrison's Animal Man so much too, just because I mean it's sort of a superhero comic, but as you get further along and you get that one reveal, I don't know if it's much of a spoiler these days, but where he kind of
Please
turns.
go. It's been what, 30 years?
Yeah, where he turns and looks at the reader, and I just remember when I first read that, I was just like, "Wow, that is cool," and it was so different, and it was so much fun. And so, yeah, that's the kind of thing I love reading, is just like people who are being a little more experimental, and it all works. I mean, it's risky, but like if you can make it work in your storytelling, then that's cool.
Absolutely. I remember that I it's one of the only books, Animal Man, I mean, where I can say two completely different writers and ideas and eras, which is, Grant and Jamie Delano.
Yeah,
I love them both to bits. I think they're both masterpieces. And one is completely meta, which is Grant, and the other one is a horror. I think that the first pure horror comic I saw in Vertigo, because, Swamp Thing is horror, but it's a different thing. I think it's a lot more poetry involved. Well, no, Jamie was doing Hellblazer, which is horror too. So I don't know, but you know what I mean. You were reading both, and they're like, "Wait, is this the same comic book?" And then when I had Jamie here, I asked him if he did it on purpose, because he wanted to separate himself from Grant's story and the way he was telling a story. And Jamie was, "No, I gotta be completely honest. I didn't read it. I didn't know where Grant did. I just read Animal Man, and the moment I read Animal Man, I thought, the red, the green, and the horror. That's what it came to him." And I was like, so that was just because of the name?
Yeah.
And then you see that Geof, when he had the chance, Lemire chose to continue what Jamie did, which is, for me, this is so weird. Nobody in 25 years has followed what Jamie did.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like, that's the connection with something. That's the connection with all, the mystical parts, the horror parts of the DC universe, and nobody had followed that. So for me, it was genius that Geof decided to follow that.
Yeah, that was great stuff too. I liked when Geof and Snyder did that Rot World thing.
Yep.
And they had some great artists on that. I remember it started with Travel Foreman, I think, but that was a lot of fun. So, and yeah, it's weird. I told you I've been rereading the Sandman comics. I think the last time I read all of them at once was in high school, and there's some points in that comic that just get really deep, particularly in that first arc where the Sandman is he gets free after being incarcerated for decades, and the first person he meets when he's trying to gather back his mask and his sand and his gem is John Constantine. And John Constantine gave his ex-girlfriend, who was a drug addict, the bag of sand that the Sandman needs. So they go to visit her, and I just remember I was reading it, and they're in this old rundown house, and they go through a hallway, and the hallway is her dad. It's just the dad's skin along the hallway, and it's still alive. So it's a real weird intro into this bizarre scene that's going to happen. And then they go into the room, and there's the girl, and she's naked, and I don't know if she's on drugs, but the drug was the sand in the end, and she just looks terrible. And John Constantine lights a cigarette and is all stressed out because he loved this girl. And the Sandman tells her the minute he takes the bag away from her, she's going to die. So John Constantine leaves the room because it's too hard on him. And he asks the Sandman, is there anything you can do? And he's like, yeah, there's something I can do. So Constantine leaves the room. The Sandman puts his sand on the girl's forehead, and she goes to sleep. And in her dreams before she dies is a life with John Constantine on the beach, and she's healthy. And then the Sandman leaves the room and sees Constantine outside smoking and upset, and never tells him what happens. And I just remember that being a really deep moment in reading a comic book, because it was oh wow, these two people could have had a life together and happy. And the biggest problem here is they never communicated that to each other. And it was just like a real deep moment in a comic. I just remember just being blown away by that. So
Yeah,
sorry for
absolutely.
the long story. I just remember reading that and being like, wow.
No, it's absolutely. I agree with you. I remember when, of course, back in the day, I was coming all the way from Alan Moore on Swamp Thing and Miracle Man and Watchmen, of course, and Dark Knight was there too, and The Shadow and all the stuff by Howard Chaykin and all the others was also there. So you could see the huge jump comics were taking, with Born Again, Dark Knight, and all that too. But I remember reading Sandman, and then I asked Karen about it many times in person, and then afterwards, of course, and also here, if that the intention with Sandman and the others was just to follow what Alan had been doing before, and she openly said yes. Alan opened the door, and that door was the one that Neil could follow. If Alan hadn't done something the way he did it, or Watchmen, etc., and the others, Vertigo couldn't exist, and those stories, nobody would have believed a comic could make it. So that's what Neil and the others could use. Neil, Grant, Peter Milligan, Jamie, and all the others just saw that door open, said, you know what, the stories I want to tell, I can tell them here.
And there are types of stories that I think you're more used to reading in the prose world at the time than the comics world. So, a lot more mature, because I remember when I was a kid and those books were coming out, like, I'm pretty sure I remember, like, you had to go back into, like, some of the 18 plus rooms in the back of the comic store where they had those books. They weren't to be sold to kids. And so I remember, like, that being another reason why I wanted them, because, like, I think most kids just want to be treated like adults, and they want to read what adults are reading. So. Yeah,
absolutely. And they had the mature label, and you wanted to be mature, and honestly, for many people, including myself, I don't remember how much older than you I am, but I know I am. I'm not going to ask for your age, but it's also, there was a time when you were reading superheroes, and then there was a gap, and you were saying, what's the next thing? And in many people's cases, since they didn't have young adult or whatever you want to call it, they just, or even manga back in the day, they just left comics. But for some of us, including myself, I left comics, and then suddenly in a store, I saw, I left comics after Swamp Thing, Watchmen, and all that, but a couple of years later, I think it was, I saw in a store the cover for the first Sandman issue. And I just grabbed it.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's this? And it wasn't even Vertigo. Remember, the first Sandman is not Vertigo, it was still DC.
Yeah.
And when I grabbed it, I read it, like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
I want more.
The cover and everything too, yeah.
It's like, so that took me back to comics. So I think that happened to a lot of people too, that those kind of books, again, since you were looking for the stuff that no other kid read that made you more adult, that took you back to comics, right?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I had a gap in reading comics too, because I put them aside when I was in high school and wasn't reading any. So I read them when I was a kid, and I kind of returned to them maybe closer to when I was in college. But it is kind of interesting where we have these points where you put a certain kind of storytelling in a graphic form aside, and then come back to a different type of it later. What's interesting too, when I mentioned I was in law school. When I was in law school, that was kind of the first time I started reading manga. Like, I had read some before, but I was never sold on it entirely. But the experience of being able, for one thing, there's so much good manga out there that I never knew about at the time. But because I was reading so much dense law cases at the time, there was something really pleasurable about getting like a 600-page manga book and being able to read it in like an hour.
Yeah.
Like, felt like a really good. Yeah, and there was so much good stuff, and I was reading a lot of really good ones at the time too. So I only started reading manga a couple of years ago, and then I was burning through so much that I could. And I started, I think, with the Urasawa stuff. I was reading Pluto and 21st Century Boys and Monster, because that stuff was crazy. Yeah, it's interesting. At different points in your life, you're picking up different kinds of things to read, particularly in comics. So we have, and so my second reading of Sandman is just a different experience of reading of Sandman, because when I read it in high school, I didn't have the same experience reading that scene with Constantine when I was in high school that I did recently. So you interpret literature and movies and things in different ways along your life.
Yeah, and of course you don't understand or have read maybe the books that Neil is referencing, the references to Shakespeare or stuff like that you don't know. But when you're older, you have read those books, or you know about those books in any way, be with movies, etc. So you have a deeper understanding of which ones are the subjects he's just trying to mirror, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, I lost you froze for a second. See, Frank Galan says, hi David and Daniel. Daniel is the best editor on the planet.
Oh, that Fran, you're the best. Fran has been excellent to work with.
We are not saying what project because it hasn't been announced yet, but they're working together. Just you know that. And Paula Ventimiglia asks you, this is interesting. As an artist, how can I get you an Instagram link of my work?
I am on Instagram. How about you? You're more than welcome to message me on there, and then I can share my email to you. What is my Instagram just off the top of my head? I just want to make sure I give you the right one.
Not too shabby?
Yeah, So I'm NOTTOOCHABY. Mm-hmm. If you just message me on there, I'll share my email, and then you're more than welcome to send your artwork to me.
Mm-hmm. And Paula, if you can find his handle on Instagram, let me know and I'll send you a private message. Okay. For you, if I ask you comics storytelling, what is it? Rock and roll, jazz, or a symphony? What would you say?
What do you mean? I want to make sure I answer this.
Yes, for me, I always equate a lot more the comics language to music than I do to movies. I think it's a lot more related to poetry and to music. And it's curious we were talking about Sandman because I think it's a great example of that. The storytelling for me is always based on the pace. For example, for me, superhero comics is basically always it's a symphony or opera because it goes this high. You have the battle, you have the epic scene, then the calm scene, then you go up again, bam, 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 bam. So it's always like that. But in other comics, some creators have told me, I think it's jazz. And some others tells me, I think the British all tells me if they think it's punk, for example, for whatever reason.
So comparing comics to a particular genre of music?
Yeah. The storytelling, not comics is about the storytelling.
I guess it depends on the particular story.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. You look at something by like Grant Morrison, and that's like, I don't even know what kind of music that. I mean, you could see like a lot of punk in certain storytellings, and maybe in his style. I don't know. Is there a particular writer or story that you would compare to like jazz? You're saying jazz, or an opera?
I could say Mazzucchelli's jazz.
I could see that. Particularly like a Asterisk.
Yes, Asterios Polyp. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking about. Yeah.
I wonder, like, that's interesting. I've never had that question before, so I don't know if I have a particular answer. Like, I wonder what you would call, like, I guess some of the more like Fantagraphics ones are making me think of more particularly closer to like a music genre, like maybe a Ghost World could be. I mean, there's music quoted and stuff like in those books. So
yeah, but you are being too literal.
I am being too literal.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't mean that. I didn't mean that as an insult, please. You're going to the direct comparison, with the gender, and I'm not trying to say that. I mean, when I'm reading something, as I said, I equate it to music. Mm-hmm. It has a pace in my head, So for me, when I'm reading, as I said, Asterios Polyp, I think jazz. I think Chick Corea. I think John McLaughlin. I think things like that. Or when I'm reading Grant, I can think of punk. I can think of the Smiths. I can think of the Dark Side of the Moon. Like Pink Floyd.
Yeah, I can see that.
So
Absolutely.
that when I say with superheroes, I'm thinking about the score for the Avengers, to say something. You're thinking about a symphony. You're thinking about opera, something that is really exaggerated. So that's what I mean.
Yeah.
What's the feeling that? What's the feeling that the different storytelling for different comic genres? Like we're talking about romance. Maybe we can talk about superheroes. We can talk about horror. And in your head, is there any kind of soundtrack to say in another way? Let's go literal. Yes, a soundtrack that flows in your head, saying this could be this music.
I don't know. I mean, reading the Sandman stuff recently, like, when I read it, I'll be listening to like classical music, and I think it kind of, while I'm listening to that, it kind of matches the background a little more. So I think that storytelling and its broadness kind of flows pretty well with that type of music, depending on the composer.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm trying to think of some like what would be one that'd be more of a comparison to like a rock band, which is kind of interesting to me. I suppose you can always do UmbrellaAcademy with My Chemical Romance. So
that's too easy.
That's too on the nose.
Yes. Let's say Harrow County.
Yes.
Harrow County. What would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one. I feel like it would have some like violin or fiddle in there, or some Halloween music.
What if I tell you
one? That seems like one that could be a little more Smiths-y, maybe. Or what are you thinking?
I was gonna say, what would you think if I said Metallica?
I don't know if I would agree with that, but that's interesting. Huh? Metallica, huh? Maybe in some of the later arcs where it's
That's the thing I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the last parts. The beginning, I don't have it that fresh, but yeah, maybe it doesn't fit that well with the beginning.
I might be biased on that one because that's an interesting example. Because Tyler Crook, who painted the whole thing, actually made a soundtrack for that comic book, and it had like a real slow eeriness to it. So if I think of music associated with Harrow County, it's with the music that he composed.
Yeah, of course.
Which you can actually get online for free too. You just look it up. But yeah, that's interesting. Metallica for Harrow County. I mean, that's pretty cool. So.
He'll probably kill me if he hears this. But what about Black Hammer?
These are hard.
I'm sorry.
I don't know. Maybe something a little more melancholy, like an Elliott Smith, or it's a story like a lot of heart and sadness to it. So I think it would need like a slower, sadder singer.
Yeah, I was thinking with Black Hammer. I always think crooners, like Sinatra, Tony Bennett, and things like that, like nostalgia from the past with crooners, with beautiful voices that transport you to those places.
Maybe it could be both, because some of the the past stories of the superheroes in Black Hammer are always a lot more golden age, superhero age, so they're a lot more like closer to the Marvel DC stuff. But then when you get to the present story on the farm, it's a lot more sadder and melancholy. So maybe it can be both.
Yeah. And is there any, when you're working, do you need complete silence, or you also have a soundtrack which you change depending on the project you're working on, which is also the other part?
It depends on the part of the project. If I'm reading a script, like total silence is key. So like reading a script in the office before the pandemic, like if people are walking around my office, like talking real loud or laughing real loud, like I have a door I can close, but even then, like there'll still be points where it's just like, I'm trying to read, we're in a workplace. Like that's not all the time, but like really when I'm reading a script, I really need my full focus just so I can really like absorb it and understand what's going on and what all these people are doing, so I can get back to the creator and tell them what I think or what needs help. Beyond reading the script, like reading lettered colors and stuff like that, I can kind of do with some background noise. So I was editing a comic yesterday, and outside my house, there was some construction work and somebody with a jackhammer.
Oh.
Which they were using up until midnight last night. So,
shit.
Yeah, I know. So if I seem a little sleepy, I didn't get too much sleep last night. But
I'm so sorry about that. I could have changed the time or something.
no, you're good. But even with that in the background, like I can still read a comic and focus. It's really at the script stage and the plot summary stage. Like I really want full focus so I can kind of really get back to the creator in an authentic way.
Mm-hmm. And you change the music, the kind of music you listen to, depending on the comic you're reading.
Yeah, actually, last night I was listening to not even music. It was like was it ASMR? Laugh. It's just like background noise. So it's just like there was like it helps me sleep too. So after I'm done, I'll be able to crash. So it was like I remember I was listening to one on Spotify that was just white noise. And then they also have
I'm not gonna laugh because my 6-year-old,
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. Until she was 3.5 or something, it was impossible to get her to bed. She always ended up in our bed until one day I got one, Amazon Echo stuff. So I started to put a specific stuff trying for her to sleep on her own.
Yeah.
And finally I found one of those. What's the name of the? One of whatever it's called, sleep. Just it's Alexa, don't listen to me. Alexa, put on sleep music.
Yeah.
And that is just Alexa, shut up. Alexa, cállate. Alexa, para. Sorry, it was activated. But that's the thing, until she had that kind of repeated thing that calmed her down, she couldn't sleep at all. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised about the need to use that.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. It helps you sleep. It's good at de-stressing. So particularly in this year of the year and a half of the pandemic. So it's nice to fall asleep too. But yeah, I don't know. I miss going to shows and seeing live bands though. I can't remember what the last one I saw was. But yeah, hopefully at some point here soon, some more music.
You're not alone on that. I don't remember what was the last last concert I watched. I remember the ones I was going to go to this year that got canceled, but because I'm hoping they do it again. Whatever, when I know I have in my calendar, like Foo Fighters are coming.
Oh yeah.
So that one was on my calendar, and a couple more. I don't remember which ones, but let's cross our fingers and hope maybe not this year, but next year it happens again.
Hopefully.
What is the most unique thing? We're talking about storytelling, music, and poetry, and all that. What is the most unique thing you think comics have compared to other narrative art forms?
It's a good question. I think. I mean, everyone gets their own personal experience with reading a comic and their own interpretations of it and their own time with it. So you can, I don't know. I think there's something that comics and graphic literature have to offer that is unique and different than movies and prose books. It's a little hard to define, but it's its own thing and its own value. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's just there's something unique about reading a comic book that is separate from reading a book or watching a movie or listening to a song on the internet. Mm-hmm. So
I always said, let me know if you agree with this. And so sorry for the rest of you who know I repeat this once a week at least. I always say that the thing that comic has, that the two things that comic has that no other art has is, one is reader participation. Mm-hmm. I think in other, in a movie, in theater, well, maybe not in theater, maybe it could be an exception, but in literature, etc., in a novel, the reader, the audience, in a way, is a lot more passive. But in comic, we need a lot of the reader participation, right? I mean, not only because of the page turns that you, as an editor or the writer, determines, also because the reader can change the pace of the story depending on how they want to read it, right? It's not up to you. Even if you're the creator, you can tell the reader this is the way you have to read it, but it's the reader finally he's going to decide it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And a page turn is a good example because that is a thing where how the writer is communicating to the reader in a real important way that could be lost if you don't pay attention to where you're putting a page turn. So I've gotten a lot of scripts in the past where the writer will put a splash reveal on the right hand side of the page, on the comic, on the odd page, and if it's there, when you flip that page to get to where that is, the first thing your eye is going to go to is that splash on the right hand side, and so it's always probably pretty key to have that on the next page after, on the even page, so that your reveal is has more impact in the end. So you don't end up seeing that first and then reading what comes before it.
Yep. So that takes me to that question. As an editor, how important is the page turn for you?
Very important. So anytime I see it, I call it out. And then if a creator really wants it where it is, I'll let it be, just because that's what they intended. But yeah, I do think it's super important to, when you can, put a page turn or reveal on the even page on the left-hand side of the comic book. So things are a little bit different these days if you're reading a comic on an iPad, because then those don't matter as much anymore because you're reading one page at a time. But if you're reading a print comic, you want that page turn to be on the left-hand side if you can, if it works.
And is it important for you to have a cliffhanger in every page turn? You there? Hello?
Can you see me?
Yes, now I can see you. You froze for 5 seconds. You were saying, sorry?
My internet. Yeah, it's not required on my end. Like usually, something like that I think would be good at the end of the issue, but it's not as important to me as having a splash on the left hand side.
And the other thing I was saying is that, aside of the reader participation, what I was mentioning, the other thing that I was mentioning as the most unique thing in comics is that comics is the only art form that can defy the Einstein's theory of relativity. And what I mean with that is, this is a movie. It always goes, the arrow of time, this is a novel. The arrow of time always goes forward. And in comics, you have absolute control as editor, as writer, and artist. You guys have absolute control about time and space, right? You can tell, you can sit down with your writer and say, read the script, and the script says, oh, these 22 pages happen, all of them happen in the same second. Or you can say it happened in 3 different time zones, 3 different eras, 3 different whatever, or years, whatever, or go back and forth and just do this and say, this is one moment and this is the next, without saying a word. Because what do you think about that?
It's interesting. You have a lot of control over how big the gaps in time are in a book. Like I actually was reading a plot summary before it goes to script last night for a book, and the writer accidentally wrote it to be 6 issues when we said we were going to do 4 issues. And as I was reading it, I kept thinking, no, this should be 4 issues, not just because that's what we approved, but also like how these events in time are laid out in the story that you just sent me. Like this could all fit in 4 issues. Like everything you have in these 2 issues actually should be in the first issue. Like to me, and maybe this is a little tangent, but like getting as much as you can in that first issue is really important, because if it's a new comic by a new creator, like really try your best to put as much in that first issue to hook that reader to come back 1 month later to buy that second issue, as it's competing with a whole bunch of other new number ones. Like that's one thing we did in Harrow County in issue number 1. We tried to put in as much as we could. We added a prologue, which I thought was good to give some backstory, and then like a spot at the end that kind of is a reveal, but also will hint at what you can expect in the next issue and through the series. And really trying your best to get as much in that first issue, I think, is important.
Mhm. And how important it is for you to keep if it's important at all, to keep doing monthly comics as opposed to just do straight graphic novels? Or you think that the future is going to be graphic novels and that's it?
It is important to me to do single issues, just because I don't know. I personally get more enjoyment out of that. It's what I'm used to working on, and in that storytelling experience of breaking things down into these chapters, I think it's helpful. And I enjoy the experience of seeing them come out monthly before they get collected.
Mm-hmm.
It's an expensive habit, buying single issue comics, but it's nostalgic for me. It's rewarding, and it's fun to work on. So I hope that part stays. But we'll see.
Yeah, but it's also like when people talk to me about this, I always say the same thing: is would you like to see only movies and not TV shows? And they're like, what do you mean? Like, well, our monthlies are the TV shows. We have a chapter in a continuing story, and then the graphic novels are the movies. We have both. Why does it have to be one against the other? Why can't we have both?
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're seeing it is such an odd thing in this time to be releasing portions of a book monthly, but you're still seeing some experimentation in other types of media, like with Disney Plus, this WandaVision stuff. I believe each episode is weekly, as opposed to on Netflix. Once in a while, you just get a whole season dumped at once. It's kind of nice to not have to feel like you have to watch everything overnight before people start talking about on Twitter.
Absolutely.
But then even in WandaVision, like, you got to watch an episode before people start talking on Twitter. So
yeah, because I can't watch it until tonight. I'm off Twitter most of the day today because and I have blocked some words. You can do it in TweetDeck. So some words come out. It's like, okay, that tweet is not going to show in my time.
You're doing the right thing. I do see people complaining about spoilers on Twitter, but then my other reaction is like, don't log into Twitter. Like, that's going to happen.
Yeah, if you're there, it's going to happen. Don't risk it. No, but we just said it's really interesting because you can see Netflix and Amazon are the binge watch, but then you have HBO has always been one a week, and then Disney and Apple, who started at the same time, are strictly that. They don't have binge watch. It's every week you have a new episode.
Okay. Cool.
And I prefer, I prefer the experience. And I asked I'm not interested in that show. I didn't like it. But, my wife was watching the morning show. She loves it. And in Apple. And I was asking her, as an experiment, what do you like the most? To watch binge as you do in Netflix, or to do it? It's different experiences. It's that I like to have both. I think there's shows that call for that. Give me a week, to digest or to watch in a certain way. And there's others who tell you, sit down for a weekend and just go for them.
Well, I find with I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please go.
I find that when it's a big like season dump of all the episodes, like, I get a little less interested along the way, just because you're just watching one after another, and then you start doing things at the same time. So if it's one episode at a time, it's kind of nice because you get a week to digest it or so, and then you're ready to kind of come back to it primed and give it your full attention.
Yeah, I think, for example, with WandaVision, people are going to say I'm a heathen. I'm going to kill me here. But if WandaVision was binge watch all the seasons, I would have probably left it by the third episode. Yeah. Not because I don't like it, but because of that thing with the experimentation using old ways of doing comedy shows.
Yeah.
Since you don't know it's separated and it's going to be different, and they can drop you trailers to tell you, hey, next week you're going to have that.
Yeah.
At the third episode, you're like, oh, is it all going to be this way? You get tired and leave it. But since you have the separation every week and you get a tease of, no, this is what's going to happen next week. This week is this era. This other week is this other era. I think the time it gives you to digest it, it's also good for you to keep interested on it.
It's a more enjoyable watch, because if it's every episode at once, it just starts to feel like work to
Yeah.
have to get through it all until you get to the end. And at the end, you're not as interested anymore because you just burn through 10 things at once. And then just kind of like, that was a lot.
And there's also that aspect, as we mentioned before. I think that everybody's going to be talking about the whole season when you don't know if you're going to have time to watch it in 10 weeks,
Yeah.
which is usually what happens to me. People was talking about the finale of The Expanse, of the current season of The Expanse, when I was in episode 1.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck? Where do you guys get your time to watch it? Oh, I spend the whole weekend. It's like, wait, you spend your whole weekend non-stop watching? Don't you have a life? I have a daughter. I prefer to play with my daughter, instead of being 10 hours straight watching a TV show.
Yeah.
So I'd rather have it, bit by bit. And people is going to comment on the whole season. So please give me separate things. Give us time to watch.
I think the biggest spoiler for me that I can remember was when Fight Club came out. Before I saw it, somebody just told me, "Oh, he's Brad Pitt's his imagination," and I was just like, "Oh, okay." And then I saw it, and I was like, "Well, it's still worth seeing. It's a great movie." But it's just like, you basically told me like the Darth Vader is his dad thing. Or,
yeah, that was what they did it to me with Seven.
Oh yeah.
What was on the wait, I don't remember. It was a suitcase or on a bag?
It's the box.
In a box, exactly. So
in the box?
somebody told me somebody told me what was on the box. And
Yeah.
it's like, you're not going to like this movie, it's like it has a twist. It's about what's on the box, and it's that. And I was like, I'm fucking killing you.
Yeah. Well, that
Why is
maybe
that
even with
important?
the spoiler.
I know you don't like twist movies. Well, I don't like twist movies if the twists are stupid and dumb. If they're well done and it's fucking David Fincher, I'm probably gonna like it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what is the go please?
Oh, I was just gonna say that movie still holds up too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what is your favorite Fincher?
It changes.
If
Yeah,
you like
usually-
Fincher, I'm assuming you like Fincher, by the way.
I do like Fincher. My favorite movie that I always throw out is True Romance, the written by Tarantino and directed by Tony Scott. That's the
Yep.
Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette movie. I've seen it a bunch. It's just a nice, simple, good love on the run story with
That's
an
amazing.
amazing cast.
Dennis
Great-
Hopper is God.
Dennis Hopper there, Christopher Walken,
Yeah.
Michael Rappaport, Gary Oldman. Like that movie is bananas. So I
Yeah.
always like that just because like that movie's just candy.
Yeah.
It's not trying to be super smart or intense. Like it's just you're gonna have fun watching this movie. And the first time I saw it, I just remember I loved it. I like Grosse Point Blank a lot, the John Cusack Hitman movie. Old school Charlie Chaplin movies. Modern times, with as old as that movie is, it's still funny and has a lot of heart. I don't know. I've been watching a lot of old school horror movies recently when I do watch TV right now. But yeah, some of those have been my favorites, I think. There's a movie called Kicking and Screaming that came out in the 90s. Not the Will Ferrell one. It's one by Noah Baumbach.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen that? There's a Criterion Collection version of that. It's a really good movie.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's your favorite movie?
Well, depends on the day. But if you're asking me, I think I'm not kidding. I name my dogs based on my favorite movies. So
Okay.
Before, the one who passed was Bullet, which I
Great
think
car chase.
the best car chase ever, and closely followed by The French Connection. But I think this is the best one, and of course Steve McQueen kicking ass as usual.
Yeah.
And the second one would be To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah. Also,
So
great song.
my current dog, his name is Atticus Finch.
Do you like the movie better than the book? Have you read the book?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm thinking. Yeah, I like the movie better than the book.
Yeah, it's a rare one when people say that, but I do too. Like it's just
It's Gregory Peck. I mean, that gravitas, that charisma, that calm, that zen in a way you see in Peck. It can be transmitted to you in the book, But at the same time, the moment you watch Peck and his body is lumping and his body language, etc., that's a step beyond. I think that's the extra part that makes me say I would like. That's like the name of the rose.
Yeah.
I think that's the only other one I would say that. Like, first, the book I think is too fond of itself, but also the William of Baskerville, that presence, that Sean Connery's presence, that makes the movie automatically more interesting to me.
Yeah, it's a great movie. And then and To Kill a Mockingbird, just right from the beginning when that Elmer Bernstein soundtrack kicks in,
that's true.
like your heartstrings are being pulled. You're like, okay, this is gonna make me cry.
Yeah, it's hardcore. But yeah, I used to name my dogs after that, and of course Blade Runner, Alien, and this is weird because I'm gonna say that my favorite Scott is not Ridley, it's Tony.
Yeah, his movies are really interesting, and their styles are so different.
And also because I think that Ridley is a brilliant image maker, but also a guy who needs a producer.
Yeah.
to tell him, no, really, that looks amazing, but makes no fucking sense. Stop.
Yeah, for sure.
So that I think that's a guy who needs to be ruled. But I believe that if we talk about the whole career, I think Tony Scott is the average. Is much, much, much better.
Yeah, he had a movie. Did he do that movie? It was on a train. A lot of people didn't see it. It had Chris Pine in it. Like I know that Tony had died years ago, but I think it might have been one of his last movies, and it was one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite movies. I haven't seen it yet, but apparently it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and everything he did with Denzel Washington, and as you said, Amor a Quemarropa, we call it here, the Christian Slater and company movie. I think as an average, Tony's career is about Ridley. Maybe Ridley is the better in terms of how beautiful his images are. But Tony wasn't a slouch either. Was to shoot. How do you call Amor a Quemarropa? Sorry, the Christian Slater and Patricia Arquette one.
True Romance.
True Romance.
Yeah.
To shoot True Romance, it's not an easy task. That script was. I can't believe that script was easy to film.
And it's an interesting story too, because he at that point I think was still working. Tarantino was still working in a video store, and he had 3 screenplays, and he wanted to direct one of them. And so he had Reservoir Dogs, he had True Romance, and he had Natural Born Killers.
Mm-hmm.
And what would have been like if he directed one of the other 2? Because he directed Reservoir Dogs, but what if he directed True Romance? I don't think it would be as good, or it definitely wouldn't be the same movie. It'd be a Tarantino-style movie, but it really does work. Because the movie has kind of a magical feel to it, and I think that comes from Tony Scott.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. Tarantino could be a people talking movie, which is fine, but it could lose that magic. What I am not going to say video clip because it's not a video clip, but that fast paced, surreal. Because for me, True Romance has a lot of surreal moments. That surreal that wouldn't be in Tarantino because that's not his style.
When I have been watching movies recently, I have mostly been watching on HBO Max because they have a lot more older movies on there, a lot of Criterion feature movies, and Turner Classic Movie stuff. And there's one movie I'd never seen before that I watched that I've been trying to sell to everybody called Thief. Have you seen that? The Michael Mann movie? The movie is great.
I've watched. I think I've watched all of Michael Mann's movies, even the horrible ones.
Yeah,
I love Michael Mann. Thief is one of the unknowns, but it's a fucking amazing movie.
The soundtrack. You could go watch a whole bunch of other great movies just by following Tangerine Dream. Sorcerer was a movie that I saw really late, and Sorcerer was a cool movie that was doomed because it came out the same weekend as Star Wars. So,
yeah. but back at that moment, you couldn't know that.
Yeah.
Nobody believed Star Wars would be anything but a flop.
Yeah, of course.
So I guess that everybody was thinking, the big one was going to be Sorcerers, and Star Wars would be the thing that the B movie nobody cared about.
Yeah, some people say that Sorcerer is one of the best movies ever made, never seen. It's interesting. It's a remake too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great movie, and that soundtrack is great. And yeah, Tangerine Dream, just any movie they seem to do the soundtrack for has always been a great movie.
Mm-hmm. If I ask you to pick between Steven Soderbergh and David Fincher, who would you pick?
Boy, I'd probably have to look at a list of both their movies. I've seen a bunch of their movies, but probably I think David Fincher is more my cup of tea. I like Steven Soderbergh a lot, but not as much.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, we've been at this, just so you know, for 94 minutes. So you probably have to go back to your life and to work.
Yeah.
So one last, and I'll let you go. Is there anything in comics that you've been wanting to do since you started? You haven't been able to because of whatever circumstance, but in your heart of hearts, in your brain, you are like, I am not retiring or dying or any or both before I do this.
There's one project that I've always wanted to do, and in my hopes of still being able to do it, I won't be too specific, but it would involve
no details. We don't need any details so anybody doesn't copy you.
Yeah, so I'll be very vague, but it would involve another company's character. And I think it would just be a real fun experience. I mean, I don't think it would be anything meant to be brilliant, but I just think it would be. I think there's an audience for it, and I'd love the opportunity to do it at some point. I have pitched it to that company before, and I'll keep trying, but I think it'd be a lot of fun. So it's just the con is it'd be with another company that's basically competition, but I don't know. We're all in this together, so if they're willing to license it.
But at the end of the day, we're all a family here. And and do you see yourself in comics forever?
As long as they'll keep me. So
that's what I wanted to hear.
That's why I'm not a lawyer right now.
Exactly. So
a lot of people ask me, it's like, why are you not a lawyer? And it's like, well, I still like working in comics, so it doesn't pay the same as a lawyer. So
but it was probably a lot more fun.
It's always fun. So it's a great industry. I love it, and I want to be in it as long as I can.
Anyway, so guys, so first of all, thank you so much, Daniel, for being here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for waking up so early and for taking time from your breakfast or time before work. And thank you for everything, as always.
Yeah, and thank you. And it's always nice to talk to you. And I miss seeing you at shows. And hopefully, when things get back to normal, I don't know. I'll see you again here soon. Maybe go back to Spain at some point.
Oh yeah, that I will make that happen. Don't worry about that.
Please, I love Spain.
To Spain or other parts of Europe? Who knows? Who knows? There's not only Spain in my tentacles. And anyway, thank you so much for being here. Please don't cut because I want to say proper thank you to you when we are off the air. But to all of you, thank you. Have an amazing weekend. Have a lovely day too. Also, Iruno, thank you to you, Paula, too. And we'll be back on Tuesday next week. Take care. Have a nice weekend. Be decent to people. Wear your mask, okay? We are not vaccinated, all of us. We need to be decent to people and take care, okay? So bye-bye and have a nice weekend.